And my really good friend was like, absolutely. And so immediately we started like documenting these tattoos. And then she called me one day and she says, I have a girl that has Rev tattooed on the back of her neck. And her pimp had called himself the Reverend. And wow. I felt this amazing feeling that came up in me. I was like, this is my niche. But here was the thing. I still had my tattoos that I hadn't covered yet. And I was like, I think it's time that I put this past me too.
Leaders are not born in a womb. They are forged through heat, pressure, and a whole lot of sweat. The Fire Forged Leader podcast serves the audience through exploring leadership at work, in the community, and with the family, using a practical perspective and real-life experiences from the host, Steve Baumgartner, and his guests in The Forge. Now, it's time to enter the Forge with the Fire Forged Leader.
Hello, I'm Jessica Lamb. I'm the founder and director of Atlanta Redemption, Inc., and I'm excited to be on the show today.
Thank you for coming, Jessica. It is an absolute honor to have you. To start out with, can you give us a little bit of what is Atlanta Redemption, Inc. for the people who are listening?
So Atlanta Redemption, Inc., we're a survivor-led nonprofit organization, and we're based here in Atlanta, Georgia. And we help survivors who are sex industry or survivors of trafficking, former gang members, people who have struggled with self-harm, or people who have got track marks from drug addiction. And we help them cover or remove those scars or do minimal scar revision for them.
That is
we have about 87 shops. We have about 87 shops across the nation. We started right here in Covington, Georgia with one shop, and it branched out overnight.
Yeah, it's really an amazing mission, right? I mean, I think about the tattoo industry in general, and most of the time you walk into a tattoo shop, and I've been in a few of them myself, they're dark, they're loud. It's not the type of place generally that you would think that a lot of healing would come from.
Well, in my experience with the shops that we work with, we see that they are just wholesome and good environments. I take the time to really vet the shops that we're working with. I get to know the artist. I check out their work. I interview them. We do background checks just to make sure that whoever goes into those shops are getting the ultimate care that they need to be able to move forward in their healing. So I make sure that I make a point to partner with shops that I know are going to be amazing environments. And I have yet to find one that is not a good environment for a survivor.
That's awesome. So is there a certain type of shop that you actually target when you're looking at it, or?
The first thing I do is I just get to know the shop. I check out their pages. I look at reviews. I go in, if I'm local, I will go and check out the shop, or I'll drive over to it. If it's not more than a couple hours away, I'll do, Zooms or whatever, and we'll get to know them. I will ask people in the community that have had work there, how they are. We'll do a background check on them. We offer safe place training so they can become a safe place site, which I can talk about shortly. So we just want to make sure that when we're looking for shops that, they don't have any kind of sexual crimes in their background. There's not any drugs or anything in the shop, which we've not seen. We just want to make sure that people are trauma informed and trauma sensitive. So when survivors come in there, they're going in a judgment-free zone where they can get the care that they need, and someone's really there listening. And these artists kind of like going to get your hair done, it's like their therapist. You start talking to them and you get to know them, and then you find out they have their own story and they've gotten their own experiences. And then you get to see survivors and artists come together and share similar stories or experiences and just really feel loved on and cared about.
That's awesome. I've always looked at two professions really as some of the best therapy, and that's the tattoo chair
Yeah.
and the barber chair, right?
Yep. I love all of it. That could ink therapy is a beautiful thing.
I can't even imagine. I mean, these tattoo artists have to be somewhat of a people person at their core, anyways, right? I can't imagine sitting in a chair for 6 hours with someone who doesn't want to talk, right?
Yeah, and honestly, when I had my tattoo covered up, it was a horrible experience. And I knew that when I started ARI, I did not want to see another survivor or friend go through that experience. And so, making sure that I cultivated a space for people to go that was healing for them was so important to me, and I valued that.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And I want to come back to ARI, excuse me. But you just brought up your tattoo.
Mhm.
So let's rewind the track a little bit and go into, really how you got your passion with what you're doing today and where that really stems from.
So I am one of 4 kids, and I grew up in a pastor's home. And I ended up going through some sexual abuse as a child or as a teenager. And then I ended up running away from home. I struggled with self-harm, a lot of suicide ideation, just different mental health struggles. And so I ended up leaving home after a while, and I moved in with my grandmother. And then I was like, no, I'm going to go back home. So like I kind of did this thing where I was kind of displaced. Like I was going between friend's house, my grandma's house, and back home. And it just wasn't a consistent or not consistent, but just a place where I felt like I had a home. Honestly, I just didn't feel like I had a place to call home. And I was moving around a lot. And then I remember my dad was like, dude, you've got to get a job. But I didn't even have a high school diploma because I had dropped out of high school. And he's like, if you don't get a job, you got to get out. And I got in this really bad fight with my dad one night. He ended up telling me to leave. Left when I was 16, started looking through a local paper here, and somebody had listed a job, and they said that I would have a place to stay, that they would cover my expenses. It was essentially a false job ad. And so I called it, and a woman answered, and her and I talked for a while, and I was like, man, I just don't really have a place to go. I'm fighting with my folks all the time. And I'm like, I just want to get out of here. And she's like, oh, we always have openings. We can take you in. We'll make sure you're taken care of. You don't have to worry about all that. We can just, it's basically, I felt like I could grow up fast, right? And so I ended up driving. I got in another bad fight with my dad, and I said, screw this. And I had like $20 in my pocket, and I drove to South Atlanta, where I met this man and his girlfriend, and they ended up trafficking me for 6 months. So I was with him for that long. And about 3 months into that, he was like, I want you to show me that you're loyal to me and that you're loyal to this game. And he's like, I'm going to take you down to this tattoo shop. And I'm like, I'm not even 18, like I want to do everything by the book. So, in Georgia, you can't get a tattoo under the age of 18. And so he's like, nah, he's like, I'm going to trade this girl and he's going to tattoo you. And I was like, oh. So I go into the shop, and he trades his girlfriend for services to the shop owner, and they branded me on my backside and my wrist. So I had that on my body, and I felt absolutely disgusting. I just felt like I didn't feel like myself. Not only was I in an environment that I didn't need to be into, that I didn't feel like I could leave, but it's like I had a car that I could have left if I wanted to, but I didn't know where where was I going to go? Like I
felt trapped.
I used my grandma's house. I used my parents' house. My mom and dad didn't want me back at home. Family had cut ties with me. I didn't have a bunch of friends, I was like just kind of stuck. And I was like, this is my life now, is working under, I call him K online, but working under him and doing whatever he wanted me to do. So for 6 months, I worked with this man. And then one night, I just got really ballsy, and excuse the term. And I was like, I don't want to do this shit anymore. Like, this is like, I was like, I'm 17. I was like, I want to go home. And he's like, you don't have a home? He's like, I know where I know your dad works. I know where you live. No one's going to take you back. No one's going to love you. He's like, you belong to me. You're part of us now. And he wasn't like physically abusive. It was just the mind fuckery, excuse the term. Like, it was just, I constantly was like, I have nowhere to go, but this guy treats me like this, and these are my options. And so I remember, like, I had to wear like the most god awful things. They would take me shopping for all this crap, and like, I hated the way they would make me do my hair. Like, just everything about it just didn't even embody who Jessica was. And the street name they gave me, like, I hated all of it. And I just remember trying to fight back. And when I fought back, he tried to take my life. My life was spared that night, but I've never fought so hard that I did that night. It was absolutely horrendous. And it's something, sadly, I'm 38 years old, and it's something that replays in my brain almost every single day. And I do work with a therapist through all this, but it's just something that I have to constantly remember, like, I'm safe and I'm okay, that this was years ago, but it's something that plays on repeat. And so I actually just celebrated my Freedom Day, and I had the honor to be at Skull Games during it to hunt. And so it was really cool how they honored me that weekend as a survivor and for my Freedom Day. But sorry, I'm going back. When I left him, I ended up calling the police. And when the police came out, they were like, well, what do you want us to do about this? And I was like, well, this is what happened. And they were like, man, I just got on duty. I really don't want to be bothered with paperwork right now. And I just felt like that was the first time I had ever had to call law enforcement for help. And I was like, whoa, these are people that I'm supposed to call if I'm in trouble. And they didn't answer. Like, they answered, but they didn't help me in that situation. And so I remember the officer going, what do you want me to do? And I was like, I just want you to go get my car keys out of this house, and I want to get the hell out of here. And he was like, yeah, whatever. So he tells the guy, he's like, let her get her stuff so she can get out of here. And then he fist bumps my trafficker. And then he's like, girls, like, you need to leave this side of town. And I was like, cool. All right. So I was like, you know what? I have to figure this out on my own. And so I had to learn very young how to do things on my own, how to not reach out for help. I had to learn how to, if I'm in a shit situation, I have to find how to dig myself out of it, and I do not ask for help. And so the first place I went to was the guy that I was dating in high school. And he was like, hey, now that you have some experience, do you think you and I can hook up? And I was like, God, when is this nightmare going to end? And I ended up leaving his house, stopped talking to him for a while. We reconnected a couple of years ago, and he's been profusely apologizing for the way he treated me back then. But I ran to my grandmother's again, and I remember her hiding my vehicle. I had a little Geo Prism car, and she hid it behind her house. And I would stay up all night, and I would sleep all day. I was so scared that this guy was going to come for me. He never did, but the fear was always there, and I was always afraid that he was going to come after me. And I didn't speak about it to anybody for a very, very long time. People knew that something had happened, and they were just calling it the South Atlanta situation, or here we call it Griffin. But I know if there's people outside of Georgia, they're not going to know where Griffin is. But we just always called it the Griffin situation, and we didn't talk about it. We just knew that something had happened, and it wasn't something I wanted to speak about. But I went years, and then I finally went to a therapist, and I just vomited. And I was like, this is what I had gone through. And I still had these tattoos on my body. And I was working with this therapist, and then somebody had recommended that I start working with some organizations here in Atlanta that help women that are in the sex industry. And I was like, cool. So I went to this conference, and they were talking about trafficking. And I was like, I don't really fit the mold here. Because a lot of them were talking about like girls being put in storage, like cargo things, and like tape on their mouths, and like chained to things, and like beaten to death or put in dog cages. And like, I'm not saying those things might not happen to people. I'm sure they do, but like, I was like, ugh, I wasn't a trafficking victim. I was like, I just went through some really bad stuff. Like, this sucks. And then I started talking to my friend who's a survivor that runs this nonprofit, and she's like, Jess, this is commercial exploitation. This is trafficking. And I'm like, no way. I don't look like these girls. This stuff didn't happen to me. But like all that trauma led to years of drug addiction, being arrested. I was homeless. I was in and out of severely abusive relationships with men that were twice my age. Like, just so much. I had lost literally everything. And I found my place with an organization here in Atlanta, and I started volunteering with them, and I started working in their call center. And we were calling girls that were working online and offering them, options and resources. Like, do you need scholarships to go back to school? Are you in a situation that you need to get out of? And I started noticing that a lot of the girls that we were or the women that we were calling, a lot of them had a lot of ink. And I was like, we need to be documenting these. I was like, because some of these are starting to align. Some of these look similar. And my really good friend was like, absolutely. And so immediately we started like documenting these tattoos. And then she called me one day and she says, I have a girl that has Rev tattooed on the back of her neck. And her pimp had called himself the Reverend. And so she's like, how can you help her? We know that you love tattoos. How can you help her? I called a tattoo shop up locally here. And without hesitation, they covered that tattoo up and charged me nothing. And wow. I felt this amazing feeling that came up in me. I was like, this is my niche. But here was the thing. I still had my tattoos that I hadn't covered yet. And I was like, I think it's time that I put this past me too. And so I went to a shop, and the guy would make a comment about my body, or he would make a sexual innuendo, or he would be like, God, if you weren't with him, we could be together. Like, just really cringy stuff while I'm trying to cover up my branding. And so like, yeah, like I ended up getting that covered up, but it wasn't a good experience for me. But going back to the tattoos and working with this organization, I had mine covered up. I started helping these women cover up their tattoos that were in this program. The news got wind of it, and then it just kind of exploded overnight. And then I started getting phone calls outside of Atlanta. I started getting phone calls from South Georgia, West Georgia, North Georgia. Then I started getting calls from Alabama, Tennessee, like all the surrounding areas. And then it just started growing and growing. And then people were like, come share your story. We want to hear what you have to say. And so as the tattoo aspect of it grew, so did me training in the iconography and, analyzing tattoos and, what to look for and indicators. So it's just really crazy how this hellacious thing that I had gone through turned, and then I went through the sex industry independently, and then I went through homelessness and addiction, and then it became actually what my dream was as a child to do for a living, which was to work in mental health and art. So like I take two things, wow, put them together. And not only am I an art therapist contractually, I'm also, I do art therapy by doing this tattoo stuff with clients. And so it's really weird how like God put that together, or, or whatever your higher power is. Like, I just feel like everything just kind of aligned and created this beautiful organization that is helping hundreds of people each year across the nation. So yeah, I'm rambling now, but I got on a roll. Like I was got super excited about it.
I love watching you bounce in your seat because
I am bouncing in my seat.
So first off, Jessica, I know it's painful to share your story, but I really appreciate you sharing it.
Thank you.
So there's a commonality in there that I heard you say, as well as many of the other people that I talked to, and that's, I'm not trafficked. That's not me. I wasn't chained up. But, within that story, I heard all three factors, right? The force, fraud, and coercion. I'm in at different points in that story. So, um, and I also picked up on something else, and that's that, you were at a troubled time in your life. You didn't know what to do. And just like with any other predator, they pick off the sheep that's on the outside of the herd, right?
I was low-hanging fruit for this man.
Right. So, the thing that I'm really curious about and all that is the feelings that you had when I know that the tattoo artist was a jackass. Let's put that in the box that it needs to be in. But when you look at your tattoos, when they were freshly done after you got the branding taken care of, how did you feel at that moment?
So what I ended up doing is when I had the original cover up done, I actually went to one of our artists that were partnered with me, which became one of our full shops on board, and he fixed it. And
nice.
So now I love all my ink. Like, I don't think I'm covered from here down, and I'm like, every piece of artwork that's on my body signifies something, or it's something that is important to me. And so not having that mark from him on me, like, that feels incredible. And I also, like, I didn't get justice for what this guy did to me, but he is serving time. But I have no animosity against him. And I can't speak for all survivors, but in 2012, I drove out to the house that I was at, and I sat in the parking lot of where that Salvation Army is that I called the police from. And I sat in that parking lot and I cried my eyes out. And this is going to sound super weird, and I really don't care what people think, but I remember just crying and saying, I forgive you. Because I knew that if I held on to anger and bitterness and hatred, what he did to me is bullshit. What he did to me and other women is hellacious, and it will stick with me forever. But being able to say, I forgive you and I don't hold you hostage for me anymore was helpful for me. And I knew that if I continued to be bitter, that I could not be the person that I am today. And so for me, it was healing for me to say that I had forgave him. It's somebody that I think about often. Not somebody I want to think about often, but unfortunately, it's always in the forefront of my brain, especially when I share my story as often as I do. But the healing that's come from it now is irreplaceable.
That is awesome. And I would imagine that a lot of I don't know what to call them, the clients of the services that you provide feel a lot the same way. So can you share with us a little bit about, these other women, these other people? I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be women, but that your organization has helped over time and some of those interactions. I think those
there's one that's actually sticking out to me right now. I had a young lady that we covered her brand that was on her shoulder, and she had her trafficker's initials with the crown on it. And I remember her telling me that when she had it covered up, that she no longer saw the girl that she saw in the hotel mirrors. And those words have stuck with me, and I share them when I talk about ARI, because I have nothing but love for this young lady, and she is thriving. I think she's an incredible woman that I admire very much. And to hear her say that it made an impact for her is impactful to me, and it's an honor to be able to help people go through this process. We've had gentlemen who have been in gang involvement since they were young children, and they didn't have, that support system. A lot of them were sexually abused, and so they turn to what they considered family. And so they have these gang tattoos on them, and then they are in and out of the prison system because of recidivism, and so they keep going back. And so we're able to extend this opportunity for them to get these removals done, and then we're seeing them get jobs, we're seeing them thrive, we're seeing them keep employment and staying out of the prison system.
Wow.
And it's just amazing. And there's nothing that brings me more joy than to be sitting with them in the shop, and us just talking, and me investing in them, and letting them know that they're not just another applicant. They're not just another person that's applying, that they're not a dollar sign to an organization. Hell, I don't even make a check at ARI. So it's they are people that I value, and that I want to have a connection with, and that I want to see thrive. And it's not me that's doing it for them. It's them making those steps, because they are strong themselves and they have the power themselves. And it's just, sometimes we all just need that little bump, that little boost. So just to see them thrive it's been absolutely amazing.
I've never even thought about gang members till now, but I would imagine that, you have this young human that probably going through a lot of the same things as trafficking survivors, right? As far as mentally, emotionally, that sort of thing, being a young youth and not feeling trapped, feeling like they have nothing more to offer to society, right? And, that cycle continuing. So that's a really interesting connection that was just made there.
We actually have quite a lot of men and young boys that apply to the program. They often choose not to have their images placed online, because we ask people if they're okay with it. We always have those consent forms, and they just prefer not to have that. But we've helped so many young men and many boys that were either in gang involvement or involved in trafficking. We work with several there's Bob's House of Hope in Texas. We help a lot of people in the transgender community and in LGBTQA. So we're just everywhere. We're just trying to help as many people that we can. And no matter what their background is, what they believe, what they think, who they are, whatever, I just want to be able to see them thrive.
That's awesome. And I want to make a point here to everybody who's listening, right? You don't have to agree with someone, right? You don't have to agree with what they've done in their past. You don't have to agree with what their value system is today, but we can treat everybody with value and dignity.
Absolutely.
So speaking of some of those photographs, I know you got some show and tell. Would you like to take a few minutes and show some of the work that you do?
Absolutely. I also want to state that I am not a tattoo artist, that we work with tattoo artists across the nation. And then we have a couple outside of the country that we work with as well, because people often think that I am a tattoo artist, and I am not. So I do want to credit these artists that work with us. So yeah, I would love to show a couple of the images that I've been given permission to share. Let's see if I can get this working. Here's my babies, if y'all can see. Can you guys see this? Can you see that?
Not quite yet. I didn't.
All right. Sorry, I'm working on it.
I can see it in your glasses.
There
we go. All right, you are
through. All right,
Yeah.
so this young lady was referred to us from a program here in Atlanta. So she had Smirk World on her wrist, and then it had the crown above it. And then we were able to cover it with this beautiful lion. And this was done by Kayla Tyndall, who was an artist in Covington, Georgia. This was a young lady that she was trafficked through multiple states, and she had multiple traffickers. And actually, if you look under the first picture of the crown, it says Kingsley Cash. And then she traded up to was traded to Mac Blue, and Mac Blue had branded her with that crown underneath it. I love this picture. This woman is a phenomenal young lady, and we were able to cover her branding that was on her shoulder. I just love the reaction because I was able to capture her initial reaction to the tattoo cover up. So that is a candid photo of when she first got a sneak peek of her branding cover. And so this picture just makes my heart soar.
She's radiating joy in
Yes,
that picture.
she is radiating.
That's what
Like
it
you
is.
can just see it all over her. It's absolutely beautiful. It actually makes me tear up. But then we have another young lady. Unfortunately, she is no longer with us, but this survivor, she had a branding on her lower back. And here's one of our incredible artists of Villarica Inc. This is Joey Holsey. He works with our nonprofit, and he's also a safe place tattoo shop. And so if anybody is in a situation that they need to get out of, he's able to assist them and get them into a community care. And then we have a removal specialist that we work with, and we have locations all over the country for removals. So here's a picture of some gang tattoo removals that we're doing on a face. This was helping him be able to get a job. And he ended up getting a job as an electrician, working for a local union because we were able to get these off of him. And then we also do the self-harm covers. And so we have a young lady here that had these self-harm scars, and they actually continued all the way up to her shoulder.
Wow.
But this is just a depiction of, what we were able to do. And the scarring actually kind of texturized the tattoo itself, which made it kind of look 3D. But it's such a phenomenal cover. And so these are just some of the things that we were able to do here at Atlanta Redemption Inc. for survivors across the nation.
That's interesting too. And this is going to be just tattoo geekdom, I guess, portion of it. But I always heard that scar tissue was very, very hard to tattoo.
Yes, scar tissue is very hard to tattoo. And so whenever we do have an applicant that applies for scar cover, we have to make sure that the artist actually has to evaluate to see if they're able to tattoo over the scar. Because sometimes if it keloids or if it's raised, basically that the ink is just going to absorb into it like wet paper, and it's not going to do a very good job in the cover up. We've had cases where we weren't able to cover up certain scars, but not too often. We recently partnered with a esthetician that does minimal scar revision, and we have that in the 3 tri-state area of Georgia, and we're going to be expanding that as well. So if there's a scar that is flat, we're able to do a pigment over it or do a scar revision through microneedling, and then it reduces it by 50 to 70%. So that's an option for minors too. But yeah, the scar tissue is very tedious, and so it depends on the way it heals if we were able to cover it or not.
And probably a artist who's skilled in that arena,
Yes.
right?
That's why we're very particular about who we work with, because we want to make sure that they are skilled. And I actually I had this phone call yesterday with an artist. I said, hey, do you feel comfortable covering this self-harm? Because I was going through some applications yesterday. And he was like, you know what, let me check with my boss and see if this is even coverable. So like, they're not going to go like, oh yeah, we'll do it because they want notoriety or anything like that. They want to make sure that they are giving the best possible care for the people that are coming through the program, because nobody wants a blown out tattoo, right? Like you have ink, I have ink. Anybody that has ink does not want a crappy tattoo. So I'm glad that they know their skill set and they know their boundary, and they know like what they can and can't do. And so that's why we're so particular about who we work with.
Yeah, this is just amazing to me. I'm fascinated and really by, I guess, not so much what you're doing, but how much passion you have in it, Jessica. That is, I can tell how much joy it brings you to help others heal. So I'd like to thank you for that, because it, renews a little bit of my heart in there as well.
My heart literally is racing, and not because I'm nervous right now, because I'm not nervous, and my heart's racing because I have such a passion for this part of working in anti-trafficking. Like this part right here, it's my drive. It's what keeps me going. And trying to get that through to people, saying like, because I'll have people go, oh, well, that's kind of a niche, so it doesn't really work with our conference, or that's kind of a niche, so it doesn't really work for this training. And I'm going, are you, it's funny because you listed it as an indicator of trafficking. How does this not fit into your niche, like of your conference, right? So like what we have to say and what we train on with the iconography and the tattoo, like I go through the entire history of it, and it just fascinates me how I can talk about how it started at the transatlantic slave trade and even in the Egyptian era, and how it went through the Holocaust and how it turned into the twin needle system and how we see it into what we see now. Like I go through all of that during our trainings, and it literally just fires me up. I get super, super excited about talking about it clearly.
That's awesome. I mean, I wish to have half your passion about anything that I do going forward in life. So there's a huge connection, right? For me, these aren't going to come out in the order that I talk about them, but we also talked to Susie Bieberall, right? And
I love her.
Yeah, she's an awesome person, just like you. But there's a connection in between her work and your work, right? And it's the things that you're not going to make a direct connection to in this world. She told me something when I was interviewing her that just, I mean, it strikes me to my core right now, but she talks about these children's rooms, and the thing that they pay most attention to is the ceiling. And I had never thought about that, right? But that is what that child may have looked at, either while something was happening or while they were thinking about something that happened, right?
I mean, when you're in those situations, you just kind of zone out, and you're like, you have to take your brain somewhere else until it's over,
Right. And the work that, you've been caught up in, these people have to look at their bodies and see someone else's signature on them, right? And you just don't think about those things until you think about it, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's very important, very important. Going into the iconography, which I am very surprised I was able to say that word right there, because I've struggled with it.
People are like, what did you say? And I'm like, iconography.
It's a hard word.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it is. But you were just talking about, going back hundreds of years, and so tell us a little bit more in detail about that. I mean, I know this isn't a full class, so I don't want you to go into great detail, but yeah, that's very intriguing.
Well, I just kind of go when I train, I go through the history of the tattoos and like the first documented tattoo person. I go through that. I go through the transatlantic slave trade and how slave branding started and what they looked like and why they were used. I talk about ancient Rome. I talk about the Armenian genocide. I talk about the Holocaust. And then I show people how it's turned into some case studies that we've seen. Even one recently, there was a case study here, and I remember seeing this trafficking case like making headlines, and I was like, God, I wish one of those girls would apply to my program. Like, I would love to be able to cover up these brands on them when they're ready. And it actually just came across my desk this past weekend while I was at Skull Games, and so I was like, it's just, I go through the whole history of it, and then I get to see like the case studies come through, and then I see people applying that have been victims of this. And it's just kind of all kind of goes together.
That's that gets into some deep work.
I didn't want to give away too much details about the history, because like there's this whole, like I have a whole presentation with all the information. So yeah. Just give you some.
I would imagine you could probably talk on it for 4 hours straight too, if I let you.
Me? No way.
So I did notice that there was a common theme in some of the tattoos that you talked about, as well as what were in some of the pictures in the those are crowns and names and things like that.
Yes.
So when we're talking about, branding and that sort of thing, there's a couple things that go through my head. Number one, there's a sign of possession, but is there some commonalities between them that identify trafficking? And is there some sort of hierarchy, I guess, that you see within tattoo branding that shows that this person works for this person, or is it organized in any sort of manner like that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that they kind of like gang tattoos. I believe that they vary by region. I will tell people, like, I see crowns and initials here in Georgia all day long. But then I can talk to somebody out west and they're like, oh, well, we only see such these things. And I'm like, so I think it just can vary. And I just want to make sure I say this is not every crown on a survivor is going to be a brand. Yes, it is very common to see that, but there are a lot of people that put a crown on them to signify their children, or saying that their kids are royalty. So like I have seen that, but you can see a difference. You can tell a difference between somebody that is honoring their child and then a difference between somebody who has a crown with initials for their trafficker. So like it really is just looking at the tattoo and analyzing it to say, okay, this is related to this and this is related to that. But normally the indicators that I see are in references to the game, the money, their street name, their trafficker's name. I don't see a lot of barcodes. People will talk about barcodes. You'll see pictures of them. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I just, in the 7 years that I've been doing ARI and then the 12 years that I've been working in anti-trafficking, I've never seen a brand come across my desk or even on an online ad on a young lady. Again, not saying it won't happen. I'm sure it does. It's just more common overseas than what we would see here in the United States. So, yeah, there's just different indicators and they can vary depending case to case.
I think they use the barcodes in corporate America too. But yeah. Just kidding. Yeah, so I don't know. There's a lot going through my head as far as the tattoos go. But I guess the next question that I got is it simply branding, or is it also a way of communicating?
Is it branding, or I'm sorry, what?
Like a sense of communicating. Does it
Oh, okay. I get what you're asking. Sorry. So in my experience, what I have seen also when I do like street outreach, usually like a tattoo on a girl could also, or a young man could also say to somebody else, like, they belong to so and so. So say if a girl is at McDonald's getting a hamburger and she's with her abuser, and then another trafficker comes in and he's like, oh, I know that she belongs to this guy. And like, there's ways to identify who is with who, which I've had survivors tell me, this is why I want this off of my body, is because if somebody were to see me in public, they could go back to so-and-so and say, hey, I saw her at this place. And so it'd be easy to identify her. And this is just what people have told me in their experience when they get their brandings covered up. I've heard that. Also, people are like, wait, people are burning people. I also want to clarify that a branding in this situation, we're referring to a tag or a tattoo. We're not referring to somebody with a hot iron. Not saying that can't happen, but it's not as common as you would see with a tattoo ink.
Right. Wow. This probably, the whole thing is horrendous. The entire trafficking sector, right? I mean, things that happen in there is horrendous, but this is a whole new level for me too, right? Where people are putting permanent ink in people's skin to say that you're my property, right? And it's an entire devaluation of a person.
Yeah, it's dehumanizing. But then at the same time, there are survivors that I've talked to, and nobody is like pushing someone. It's not very common for someone to be pushing somebody down and like forcing them to get a tattoo. As you know, as a tattooed person and myself, my tattoo artist is like, would you stop moving? Like your lines are going to be all jacked up, like, so it's not common for someone to be held down and forced to get a tattoo. They use the force, fraud, and coercion. They use the manipulation that, well, if you love me and if you're loyal to the game, you'll do this. Or they could be completely just trauma bonded and soul tied to this person, and they want to show, loyalty to them. And so they choose to do that. And so like not every tattoo is a forced tattoo per se. It could be that they wanted to show that they could be in a romantic relationship with that person and they wanted to show loyalty. So there's so many different variables with this, and it's not cookie cutter at all. And so just something else I felt like it needed to be out there too.
No, I agree. And I probably gave the wrong impression. No matter whether that person sits in the chair willingly at the time, the intent of the branding, I think, is what really devalues that person.
Yeah.
It takes away the dignity in that relationship. So even more important, what you and the network that you have around you do, because you're showing those people that they have value, that they have dignity, that they're worth something.
And I had somebody, I was standing and talking about this organization when I first started it. And there was about, 100 people in the room. And they were like, so basically you're changing somebody's identity. And without even hesitation, I looked at them and I said, no, I'm not changing someone's identity, because that wasn't their identity to begin with. Their identity was who they were before that was even placed on them, or they chose to pick that tattoo. Like their identity isn't here. That's not what's on their body. And so it was like you could hear a pin drop in the room. And it was just like, I remember the guy that headed up the conference, he was like, mic drop, because, like it's these tattoos are not their identity. Like they're so much more than what some, dickhead said that they had to put on their body. Right. So
yeah,
that probably wasn't a very kind thing to say. I'm sorry.
No, I'm totally for that language, because I feel the same about them. But, you're really giving them a road to take back their identity, right? So that they can choose to take back their identity is probably a better way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I probably got 1,000 more questions, but I'm just going to keep on going down all sorts of rabbit holes. So I think that really gives us a good breadth of what, you've been doing over how many years? You say 7?
We're in our 7th year.
In the 7th year.
Yeah.
So
and we don't get
years.
like federal grants. We don't get federal funding. We don't have big donors that pour billions of dollars or thousands or millions into us. The way we do this is people hear about it and they go, I believe in that. And then they donate. So we're very small when it comes to financially, but we are huge when it comes to impact. And that is what is so important to me.
And it sounds like there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help, right? That
I have a great team of artists that back me up 110% and have been by my side since the beginning and are my rock stars. I love them.
So with that being said, if people hear this message and they want to support you, how do they do that?
You can go online at arionline.org and donate. So also, if you're local, the Georgia Festival of Trees are honoring us this year as one of the beneficiaries. So you can purchase a ticket and come to the Festival of Trees, which helps us be able to continue our work. You can book me to come speak. I am always willing to come speak and share about ARI, and we can go through the whole lesson of indicators and tattoo iconography. All these things are helpful for our organization. So yeah, there's the website's there, so you can donate there.
All right. And for everybody who's on audio, I will also post the website so that you can see it. as well as the pictures that Jessica is going to send me from the presentation that she did here. So you can see those as well and match them up to the audio version of this. So keep on doing the amazing work, Jessica. It is absolutely fantastic. I'm sure you can't stop now. I mean, your passion is just going to keep on driving you down that road. You probably have zero control over what you're going to do when you have that much passion in it, right? But fantastic work.
Thank you.
Thank you for, everybody who can't say thank you. That has, been in this, and, just great work. I can't tell you enough. So with that being said, you got any final words?
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of my story briefly and then talk about our mission. I do apologize for background noise, but I'm in this awesome coffee shop here having this great conversation with you. So I just appreciate your time, and I appreciate those that are tuning in to listen, and to those that are going to support ARI. And I look forward to meeting you if you ever get to in the future.
All right. And that Festival of Trees, right?
It's called the Georgia Festival of Trees. Yes. Opening night is November 17th. And I will be speaking at the gala, and they'll be auctioning off a tree that is dedicated to our mission, and it's supposed to be absolutely breathtaking event. So I encourage you to go if you're able to go get a ticket and attend the gala.
Is that in Atlanta?
It is. It's at the World Congress Center.
Okay. I have some friends in Atlanta. I'm going to tell them that they need to go check it out.
Well, I have promos for free tickets for tables for people for ARI. So you guys let me know if y'all are coming, and you guys can sit with me. So that'd be awesome.
All right. Sounds good, Jessica. I appreciate your time tonight. And I'll continue to pray that the stars keep on aligning for this mission, because it is absolutely awesome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
You have just experienced the heat and pressure of the forge. Remember, words without action are meaningless. Now, after the heat of the forge, shape your thoughts, quench your brain, then put your new tools to use, adding to your leadership. Tune in next week for more lessons from the forge.